Hello, 5th graders. Today's lesson has been about dividing decimals, and that's something that's new for you. You've never had that before. And since it is new, I want us to do the practice together, just kind of like we would in the regular classroom. You're going to need your student activity book, page 509, and you're also going to need a sheet of notebook paper. So go ahead and push pause on your video. I'm going to pause and give you a moment to make sure that you have those items ready. You should ideally be sitting at a table or somewhere that your feet are on the floor and that you have a surface for writing. I'm going to pause and let you go do that. Okay, hopefully you are back now. And today I gave you a copy of this poster and I asked you to put it in your math journal. You'll see that the title is Dividing Decimals, and this is the algorithm we're going to use to help us as we work through these problems today. If a decimal is in the house, remember the dividend because it's inside, it's in the den. If a decimal is in the house, raise it to the roof. That means that you bring it right on up top. If a decimal is on the side, over here with the divisor, you're going to slide it over to make it a whole number. Now, something that I have taken for granted that you know, and maybe you don't, so I'm going to tell you, is that whole numbers actually have a decimal as well. We just typically don't write them. So, for example, if we see the number 12, that's typically how it's written, but it would be correct to put the decimal point there. That's just saying it ends with whole numbers and you do not have any decimal parts. So when you're thinking about a whole number, for example, if I were having 12 divided by 6, I know that I'm looking at the whole number 12. But if this were a 0.6 and I go back to my poster that says if the decimal is on the side, it needs to slide, I would need to slide it over to make it a whole number. So if I slid it over, it would be here. But the thing is, if I slide it in the divisor, I also have to slide it in the dividend, and there isn't anything here to slide. But if the decimal point were here, since it's a whole number, I can add a 0 and slide it over here. And then I know that 6 times 20 is 120, and that would be my answer. Because you're sliding by a multiple of 10, you have to do both of them that way, okay? So let's look at our poster one more time before we get started with our work. If a decimal is in the house, we're going to raise it up to the roof. If a decimal is on the side, it's the divisor, we're going to slide it however many places we need to slide it to make it a whole number. If our whole number is there but doesn't have a decimal point, we know that a decimal point really does exist. It's just invisible. We can add the 0 and slide it. So let's look at page 509. In problems 1 through 4, circle the correct answer and explain your thinking, okay? So our first problem is 121 divided by 1 1/10. What I want you to do is to get your notebook paper. This is what you're going to turn in to me. And I want you to make sure that you write your name here. I'm going to put Joe's name. And then you're going to put number 1. Now make sure this is neat and clear and easy for me to read, and we're going to write down our division problem, which is 121 divided by 1 1/10. The decimal is on the side here with the divisor, so I'm going to slide it over 1. Oops, I didn't leave enough room here, which means that I'm going to slide that over, and actually that's going to be a 210. I'll tell you what, guys, let me just get a sheet of notebook paper, another one, and see if I can do that a little bit better for you. That was my bad. Everybody makes mistakes, but that's okay. Mistakes are opportunities for learning, and I've learned that I need to leave room. Okay, so once again, it's Joe, number 1, 1 1/10, and then 121, but we decided that we're going to slide so I'm going to have to slide, okay? So now I'm just pretending that the decimal isn't even there, and it's like saying 1,210 divided by 11, okay? So you should probably realize that 11 times 11 is 121. So if I were to take out 11 groups, I would subtract off 121, and that would leave me with 0. Well, 11 will not go into 0, so I'm going to put a 0 there. And our answer then would be 110. And is that one of our choices? Yes, it is. And we would circle it here on our paper. Let's go on to number 2. And number 2, our problem states 35 divided by 0.07, okay? The decimal is on the side, so I need to slide it. But to slide it to the end, I'm going to have to move it 2 places, which means I'm going to have to move this 2 places. 1, 2, which makes it 3,500. Well, I'm going to use what I know because remember, Mrs. Salyer and Joe say, always start with what you know. When I see 7 and 35, I know that 7 times 5 is 35. So I'm going to put that there. But then I have 2 zeros, and 7 will not go into 0. So my answer is going to be 500. Is that an answer choice here on my paper? Yes. So if you think about this as money, it's kind of like saying, how many groups of 7 cents would there be in $35? Okay. Now we're looking at number 3. And in this problem, I have 7.2, 7 and 2 tenths, divided by 9. Okay. If the decimal is in the house, we're going to raise it to the roof, which means we're just going to bring it right straight up, okay? And now we're going to multiply like it isn't even there. If you know your basic multiplication facts, you know that 9 times 8 is 72. Now, I'm not going to put my 8 here because that would be like saying 8 times 9 is 7. It goes into the whole 72, so it would go here, and my answer would be 8 tenths. Is that a choice here on my paper? Yes, it is. Now our next one, we have 28 and 8 tenths divided by, let's see here, 24. The decimal isn't on the side, it's in the house, so we're going to raise it to the roof. And now it's just like saying 24 will go into 288 how many times. So what I'm going to do on this one is the partial quotients algorithm like I've taught you to do with my multiples box 1, 2, 5, 10, and 20. That's going to help me find my starting point. I know that 1 times 24 is 24, 2 times 24 is 48, 5 times 24 is a little hard for me. I'm going to skip that and go on to 24 times 10 is 240. Which means that 24 times 5 would be half of that. So that's going to be 120. And 24 times 20 would be 2 with a multiple of 10, so that would be 480. That's going to be too much. I can take out 10 groups. And that means I'm going to subtract off 240. What I have left is 48. I can take off 2 more groups, and that leaves me with 0. So I have taken out 12 groups, and if I put the number 12 up here, I have 1 and 2 tenths to show my 12 groups, and is 1 and 2 tenths an answer choice here? Yes. Now, I realize that this is probably confusing to a lot of you, and that's okay because it's brand new learning for you. You're going to have to practice it multiple times before you get it in your head. But for our purposes today, since we're doing it quickly and TCAP testing is coming, what I want you to do is to remember this chart. You know, if it's in the house, it's going to come up. You know, if it's on the side, it's going to slide. I think if you'll remember that, you're going to be okay with your work. Now, let's go on to problems 5 through 8 and see what we can determine on those. On problem number 5, I can see I have 45 6/10 divided by 3. The decimal point is in the house, so I'm just going to raise it up. Now I'm thinking about how many times will 3 go into 456. Well, I know that 3 times 10 is 30. So 3 times 100 would be 300. So I'm going to take off 100 groups of 3. And if I wanted to write it up here, well, I'll get to that in a minute. That may confuse you. Now I'm just going to subtract 6 minus 0, 5 minus 0. That leaves me with 156. Well, I know that 3 times 5 is 15. So 3 times 50 would be 150. And I'm going to subtract that off, and I get 6. Now I know that 3 times 2 is 6. I'll take off 2 more groups, and that leaves me with 0. So how many groups did I take out? 152. And I'm going to put that number up here, and I have 15 2/10. So my answer to this problem is 15 2/10. Let's go on to number 6. On number 6, I have 140 divided by 3 5/10. And I see it's on the side, so I left myself some extra space here. I'm going to slide it over 1, which means I'm going to have to slide over 1 and put in my 0 here. Now, I'm thinking about how many times will 35 go into 1,400. So I'm going to be thinking about what I know. I know that 35 times 10 would be 350. I know that 35 times 100 would be 3,500. That would be way too much. So if I'm thinking about my multiples chart over here, 1, 2, 5, 10, remember that helps me come up with my starting point. 35 times 10 is 350. It means 100. That's still a long way away. So what about 50 times? Well, that would be 1,750. That's going to be too much. What about 20 times 35? That would be 700. Okay. I'm thinking 7 and 7 is 14. I think I have an idea of what's going to happen, but I'm going to solve it out just to play it out. If I take off 20 groups of 35, I'm going to subtract off 700. When I do that, I'm going to have 700 left. If I take off 20 more groups, I can subtract off another 700 and have none left. How many groups did I take out? 20 groups plus 20 groups is 40. So my answer is going to be 40. And we can estimate on this. 3.5 is kind of close to 4. And if I were to think about 140 divided by 4, or I could even think about, if I rounded it, typically if it's 5 or more, you give it a shove. But if it was easier for me to think about 3, I know that 3 times 40 is 120. So that would let me know that my answer should be in the tens. Okay, on number 7, in 5th grade, our learning target is just having a decimal either in the dividend or the divisor, not in both of them. So I want you to mark it out. And number 8, there's a decimal in both of them, and the 5th grade learning target is to just have the decimal in one of those numbers. So I want you also to mark it out. Now it asks us to look at our work for problems 5 through 8. How is dividing with decimal numbers the same as or different from dividing with whole numbers? Well, let's think about that just a moment. We could take out the decimal point and divide like it was a whole number. That's how it would be similar. How's it different? Well, when we're dividing with whole numbers, we don't have to worry about sliding if it's on the side, and we don't have to worry about raising it to the roof if there's no decimal there. So that's kind of how it's the same. So there are some similarities and there are some differences. As you continue to practice this, I promise that you'll get better at it. But the main thing that I want you to remember, if it's inside, you're going to raise it to the roof. If it's on the side, you're going to slide it to make it a whole number. And the other thing that I want you to realize is every whole number, no matter what it is, if it's a whole number, it has that invisible decimal point that's there at the end. So now I want you to go on down and read your directions on what you need to do to submit this page 509 to me. You don't have to submit your paper that you worked it out on, but I do hope that you did follow along and work it out, because that's going to help your brain remember how to do it. What you're going to do is you're going to submit this paper to me right here. So make sure that you have your name up at the top, if this were Joe's. And because it asks for the date, he's going to go ahead and fill in the date that he does it. He's going to make sure that he has his answers in every spot. He's going to make sure that he marked those 2 out because they're not a 5th grade learning target. And then what he's going to do is he's going to either upload this on Canvas, send me a picture of it, or he can even do a recording on Canvas where he holds the paper up and lets me see it and tells me what the answers are. So I hope that this is starting to make a little bit of sense to you. I promise you, as we do more practice, it will, but the main thing that you're going to have to do is to remember to look back in your math journal, because if you followed my directions, you copied this chart down exactly the way it looks right here. And that's what smart people do. When smart people are learning something, they go back to their reference sheet, and that's going to help their brain know what to do. Have a great rest of the day, 5th graders.